My parents married me to a billionaire monkey for millions. Before we get to the story, please comment below what country you are watching from. My life was the color of dust. The same reddish-brown dust that covered our yard, our small house, and even the food we ate. We were poor. Not just a little poor, but the kind of poor where you celebrate finding a whole yam for dinner. My father, Papa, had a bad leg from a farming accident, and my mother, Mama, sold oranges at the market. But most days, she came back with more oranges than money. I was the oldest of 4 children. My name is Adana, and at 17, I was the family's last hope. I did not know what kind of hope I was until the black car came. No one in our village had a car. We had bicycles with rusty chains and our own 2 feet. So when a car, long and shiny like a black beetle, rolled slowly down our narrow path, everyone came out to stare. Chickens scattered and children pointed with wide eyes. The car did not stop at the chief's house or the pastor's house. It stopped right in front of our broken fence. My heart started beating fast, like a drum. Cars like that meant one of 2 things, trouble or money. And in our village, they were often the same thing. 2 men came out. They wore black suits, even in the hot sun. Their shoes were so shiny, I could see my own worried face in them. They did not look at anyone else. They walked straight to my father, who was sitting on his stool outside, carving a piece of wood. "We are looking for the man of this house," one of them said. His voice was low and smooth, not like the loud, happy voices of our village. Papa stood up slowly, leaning on his walking stick. "I am the man," he said. The men spoke to him for a long time. Mama came out of the house, wiping her hands on her wrapper. I watched from the window, trying to hear their words. I could not hear everything, but I heard numbers, big numbers, numbers that made my mother gasp and cover her mouth with her hand. Millions! After the men left, my parents called me inside. The air in our small hut was thick and heavy. Papa could not look at me. He stared at the floor. Mama was the one who spoke. "Adana," she began, her voice shaking a little. "Those men, they came with a proposal." "A proposal? For what?" I asked, though a cold feeling was already creeping up my back. "A marriage proposal," she said. "For you." I was confused. "For me? From who? I don't know any rich men." Papa finally looked up. His eyes were sad, but there was something else there too. A hard thing, like a stone. "You do not need to know him. He is a very important man. A billionaire. He lives in the big city. He is looking for a wife. A young, quiet girl from a good family." "But why me?" I whispered. "There are many girls in the village." "He chose you," Mama said quickly. "They showed him pictures of girls from many villages, and he chose you." It did not make sense. I was not the most beautiful girl. My skin was dark from the sun, and my hands were rough from fetching water and pounding yam. There was something they were not telling me. "I don't want to marry a man I don't know," I said, my voice stronger now. That was when Mama started to cry. Softly at first, but then her shoulders shook. "Adana, do you know what this means for us? This money, it will change everything. Your brothers can go to a good school. We can fix Papa's leg. We can eat every day. We will never be hungry again." "The man will give you money to marry me?" I asked. Papa slammed his walking stick on the dirt floor.
He will not give us money. He will pay a bride price, a very, very large one. It is our tradition. But this bride price, it is enough to buy our whole village. Millions. The word echoed in the small room. It sounded like a magic word, a word that could solve every problem we had ever had. But it also sounded like a cage. What is wrong with him? I asked. If he is so rich, why does he need to find a wife from a poor village? Why doesn't a woman from the city want to marry him? My parents looked at each other. There it was, the secret. He is a very private man, Papa said, but his voice was not steady. He is different. Different how? I pushed. It does not matter, Mama cried, her tears flowing freely now. He will give you a good life, a house bigger than you can imagine. You will wear clothes made of silk. You will eat whatever you want. Is that not what every girl wants? But I did not want a big house or silk clothes. I wanted to marry Kachi, the carpenter's son, who made me laugh and carved my name into a small wooden bird. I wanted a life I understood, a life in the sun, not in the shadow of some rich, strange man. For 1 week, they begged me. They pleaded. When I still refused, they became angry. Papa stopped speaking to me. Mama's tears were replaced with a hard silence. My younger brothers looked at me with hungry eyes, not understanding why I was refusing to give them a better life. I felt the walls of my own home closing in on me. I was the sacrifice they were willing to make. On the 8th day, I gave up. I will do it, I said, my voice flat and empty. The joy on their faces was like a knife in my heart. Mama hugged me and thanked me, calling me her good, obedient daughter. Papa patted my head and said I had made him proud. They did not see the Adana and knew was gone. A ghost was standing in her place. 2 days later, the black car returned. I packed my few belongings in a small cloth bag, 2 old wrappers, my wooden comb, and the little bird Kachi had given me. I hid the bird at the bottom of the bag. The entire village came to see me off. They stared at me with a mix of envy and pity. I was the girl who was sold for millions. As I got into the car, the leather seat cold against my skin, I did not look back at my parents. If I did, they would see the hatred in my eyes. The car drove away from the dust and the poverty and everything I had ever known. We drove for hours, leaving the village roads to smooth, wide ones. We entered a city so big and loud it scared me. We passed buildings that touched the sky. Finally, we turned into a long driveway with a gate so tall it looked like the entrance to a palace. The house, it was not a house. It was a mansion, white and huge, surrounded by a garden so green it hurt my eyes. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would break my ribs. This was it. I was going to meet my husband, the rich, private, different man, the man for whom my parents had sold my future. One of the men in suits opened the car door for me. He said, "Welcome to your new home, madam." I walked on legs that felt like sticks towards the giant front door. I was terrified. I imagined an old man, maybe someone with a terrible scar or a sickness that made him hide from the world. Whatever it was, I told myself I would be strong. I had to be. The door opened and I was led into a room bigger than our entire village square. The floor was made of shining marble. Gold was everywhere. But I did not look at the gold. I looked at the creature sitting in the middle of the room. He was sitting on a huge pile of money, crisp new notes that made a mountain of color, and he was peeling a yellow banana, not with his hands, but with his long, hairy feet. He looked at me with intelligent dark eyes, and for a moment, the world stopped. My breath caught in my throat. My parents had not just married me to a man for money, they had married me to a beast.
For a long time, I did not move. I just stood there, my small cloth bag slipping from my fingers and falling silently onto the marble floor. My mind refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. A monkey. A chimpanzee. He looked back at me, his dark eyes seeming to hold an old, deep intelligence. He finished his banana, tossed the peel aside, and then, with a strange grace, he climbed down from his mountain of money. He was bigger up close, strong. He walked on his knuckles and feet, his small suit looking ridiculous and terrifying at the same time. He came closer, sniffing the air. I could smell him, a wild animal smell mixed with expensive cologne. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that when I opened them, he would be gone, that this would all be a terrible dream. But when I opened them, he was right in front of me. He reached out a long, hairy hand, not to touch me, but to gently poke the small wooden bird that had fallen out of my bag. He grunted softly, a low, questioning sound. I finally found my voice. I screamed. It was not a small sound. It was the sound of my entire world breaking apart. I screamed and scrambled backwards, away from the beast, my hands slipping on the smooth, cold floor. The man in the suit, the one who had brought me here, stepped forward. "Madam, please, there is no need to be alarmed." "Alarmed?" I shrieked, my voice raw. "That is a monkey. You want me to marry a monkey?" The man's face did not change. He remained calm, his hands folded in front of him. "My name is Mr. Adebayo. I am the master's assistant, and you are correct. Master Coco is not a man, but he is your husband now." I stared at him, then back at the chimpanzee who had retreated to a large chair and was watching us with curious eyes. No, this is a mistake, a joke. My parents, they would not do this. But even as I said the words, I knew they were a lie. The secrecy, the ridiculous amount of money, their refusal to describe him, it all made a horrible kind of sense now. "There is no mistake," Mr. Adebayo said softly. "Your family has been paid the bride price. It was a legal and binding agreement. You are now Mrs. Coco." The name sounded like poison in my ears. I jumped to my feet. My fear was turning into a hot, boiling anger. "I will not stay here. You cannot keep me here." I turned and ran. I ran back towards the giant front doors, my only thought to get out, to run back to the dust, to the hunger, to anything but this. I pulled on the heavy gold handles, but the doors would not move. They were locked solid. I banged my fists against the wood, screaming for someone to let me out. Mr. Adebayo walked slowly up behind me. He did not touch me. He just stood there. "The doors will not open, madam. The gates are locked. The walls are very high. There is no escape." His voice was not cruel. It was just a statement of fact, which made it even worse. I spun around to face him, tears of anger and fear streaming down my face. "Why? Why is this happening? How can a monkey be a billionaire?" He said, "Master Coco is very unique. He chose his words carefully. He has a mind for business. He owns companies, plantations, shipping lines. He makes decisions. I simply carry them out. He pointed to a small writing board near the monkey's chair. He communicates through writing and signs. He is more intelligent than most men I know. This was madness. I felt like I was losing my mind. A monkey who owned companies, who wrote? I want to go home, I sobbed, my fight draining away, leaving only a cold, empty despair. This is your home now, Mr. Adebayo said. He picked up my bag from the floor. Let me show you to your room. You must be tired after your journey. I was too broken to resist. I followed him like a ghost, up a wide, curving staircase. The house was silent, except for our footsteps. We walked down a long hall lined with paintings. They were beautiful, but they looked like more bars on my cage. He opened a door and stood aside. Your chambers, madam. My room was bigger than my entire house back in the village. A huge bed with white, fluffy covers sat in the middle. A wardrobe stood open, filled with more dresses and wrappers than I had ever seen, all made of silk and lace. There was a dressing table with a mirror framed in gold, and another door that led to a bathroom with a tub so big I could swim in it. It was a princess's room. But I knew what it really was. It was a cage, a beautiful golden cage. Your husband will expect you to join him for dinner at 7, Mr. Adebayo said from the doorway. I will send a servant to come and get you. He closed the door, and I heard the soft click of a lock. I was a prisoner. I spent the next few hours walking around the room, touching the soft fabrics and cold glass. It all felt fake, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. I cried until I had no more tears. I thought of my parents with their millions, celebrating their new life while I was locked in a palace with a beast. I hated them. I hated them so much. It felt like a physical sickness. At 7 o'clock, a young woman in a maid's uniform knocked softly and unlocked my door. She would not look me in the eye. She just bowed her head and said, Madam, it is time for dinner. She led me to a dining room that could have fed our whole village. A long, polished table was set for 2, 1 seat at each end. It was set with shining silver plates and sparkling glasses. Master Coco, my husband, was already there. He was no longer wearing his suit. He was just a chimpanzee, sitting in a specially built high chair at the head of the table. I sat down at the other end, my body stiff with fear. The table was so long he was far away, but I could feel his eyes on me. Servants brought in the food. Jollof rice, fried plantain, goat meat stew, and a large bowl of fresh fruit. They served me, then they placed a large plate in front of Master Coco. I watched, holding my breath, as he picked up a piece of plantain with his fingers and ate it. He picked through the rice, eating only the pieces of fish mixed in it. Then he took an orange from the fruit bowl, peeled it perfectly with his hands and feet, and ate it slice by slice. He made soft grunting noises as he ate. He never took his eyes off me. I could not eat. My stomach was a tight knot of horror. This was my life now, eating dinner every night with a monkey who was my husband, a monkey who had bought me. After he was finished, he wiped his mouth with a napkin, a strangely human gesture that chilled me to the bone. Then he climbed down from his chair and left the room without a backward glance. The maid came to escort me back to my golden cage. I locked the door behind me, leaning against it, my body trembling. I thought I would not be able to sleep. I thought I would lie awake all night listening for animal sounds, for the sound of my beast husband.
But as I lay in the giant empty bed, the silence of the mansion pressed in on me. Hours passed, then just as I was starting to drift into a restless sleep, I heard it. It came from somewhere deep within the house. It was not a grunt. It was not a hoot. It was not the sound a monkey would make. It was the sound of a man weeping, softly and full of pain. I stood up in the massive bed, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The sound came again, faint but clear in the deep silence of the house. It was the sound of weeping, a man's weeping. It was low and broken, filled with a sadness so deep it made my hairs on my arms stand up. My first thought was that I was dreaming. This had to be a trick of my tired mind, a ghost story my brain was telling itself to make sense of the madness. I squeezed my eyes shut and listened. The sound was gone. I let out a shaky breath, telling myself it was nothing. The night in a strange new place was playing tricks on my me. But then I heard it again, closer this time, or perhaps just clearer, a desperate, shuddering sob that seemed to travel through the very walls of the mansion. It was real. There was a man in this house, a man who was not Mr. Adebayo or any of the silent servants. A prisoner? Like me? A new feeling pushed through my fear. Curiosity. Who was he? Why was he crying? For the first time since I had stepped into this golden cage, I felt a purpose beyond just surviving. I had to know where that sound was coming from. I slipped out of the bed. The marble floor was cold under my bare feet. I crept to my door and twisted the heavy brass handle. It turned, but the door didn't open. Locked, just as I expected. A wave of disappointment washed over me. I pressed my ear to the wood, but I couldn't hear the crying anymore. I refused to give up. I looked around the room, my eyes searching for anything that could help me. My gaze fell upon the dressing table. It was covered in brushes and perfume bottles, and lying beside them was a set of small silver hairpins. My mother had always told me that a clever woman could open any lock with a hairpin and enough patience. I had never believed her. With trembling fingers, I took one of the pins and straightened it out. I went back to the door and pushed the thin piece of metal into the keyhole. I had no idea what I was doing. I just wiggled it, pushing and turning, listening for a click. For minutes, nothing happened. My hands grew sweaty. I was about to give up when I felt something shift inside the lock. A soft click echoed in the silent room. I held my breath and turned the handle. The door swung open. I was free. At least free from my room. The hallway outside was dark, lit only by a faint moonlight coming through a tall window at the far end. The paintings on the wall were now dark shapes, their eyes seeming to follow me as I moved. Every creak of the floorboards under my feet sounded like a gunshot. I stood perfectly still, listening. The sound of the weeping came again, guiding me. It was coming from downstairs, from a part of the house I had not seen before. I moved slowly, one careful step at a time, using the walls to guide me through the darkness. I passed the grand staircase and continued down the main hall, turning into a narrower corridor. The air here was colder. The crying grew louder, more distinct with every step I took. It was a sound of pure agony. This was not the sound of a man who was just sad. It was the sound of a man whose heart was broken. Finally, I found the source. The corridor ended at a single heavy door. It was not like the other polished wooden doors in the mansion. This one was made of dark, thick metal, with no handle on the outside, only a small barred window at eye level and a complex-looking electronic lock. The weeping was coming from behind it.
I crept closer until my face was inches from the cold steel. I put my ear against it. I could hear the man's ragged breaths between the sobs. I wanted to call out, to ask who was in there, but I was too afraid. What if he was a madman? What if this was some terrible secret I was not meant to find? I stood on my toes to peek through the small barred window. The room inside was almost completely dark. I could only make out a shape on the floor in the far corner, a person, huddled in a ball. That was all I could see. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind me. I froze, my blood turning to ice. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Mr. Adebayo was standing at the other end of the corridor, a silent shadow in the dim light. He wasn't holding a light, yet he seemed to see me perfectly. He just stood there, watching me. He was not angry. He was not surprised. His face was a calm, unreadable mask. He walked towards me, his shiny shoes making no sound on the floor. He stopped, a few feet away from me. He glanced at the metal door, then back at me. A look of something I couldn't understand, pity maybe, or regret, flashed in his eyes for a second, before disappearing. "Madam, there are parts of this house that are not for you. It is better for you if you do not wander." He gestured for me to go back. I had no choice. I walked past him, my body trembling. I could feel his eyes on my back the entire way. He followed me all the way to my room, waited for me to go inside, and then I heard the definite final click of the lock turning from the outside. I leaned against the door, my legs too weak to stand. I had not found answers. I had only found more questions. Who was the man behind the metal door? And why was Mr. Coco, my billionaire monthly husband, keeping him prisoner? The next morning I was quiet at breakfast. I sat at my end of the long table, pushing a piece of papaw around my plate. Mr. Coco was at his end, munching on a mango. The sound of his eating was loud in the silent room. But today, I was not just looking at him with fear or disgust. I was looking at him with suspicion. I watched his hairy hands, his intelligent eyes, the way his brow would sometimes furrow as if he were deep in thought. He was just an animal. He couldn't be the one who was crying. Could it? He finished his mango, then looked directly at me. He made a soft hooting sound, then picked up a small chalk slate that was beside his plate. With a piece of chalk held expertly between his fingers and thumb, he wrote 2 words and held the slate up for me to see. It said, "Are you sad?" I stared at the 4 words written in white chalk. Are you sad? The question was so simple, so direct. It was not a command. It was not a grunt or a demand for food. It was a question about my feelings. My mind spun. A monkey could not ask that. An animal could not understand sadness like this. Could it? Mr. Coco watched me, his dark eyes holding mine. He was not a dumb beast. The intelligence behind those eyes was sharp and clear. This was not a trick by Mr. Adebayo. I had watched the chalk form the letters with his own hand. I felt a great deal of emotion swelling up inside me. I couldn't find the words to answer, so I just gave a small, slow nod. Yes, I am sad. He seemed to understand. He lowered the slate, wiped it clean, and then simply watched me for the rest of the meal. The silence was different now. Before it had been the silence of a human and an animal sharing a space. Now it was the silence of 2 beings who shared a secret, even if I didn't know what the secret was. The fear was still there, but something else was growing beside it, a deep, unsettling curiosity. When the meal was over, he climbed down from his chair and left, just as he had done the day before. But this time, I felt his absence. The weeping, the question, were they connected? The thought that entered my mind was so wild, so impossible that I almost laughed. Could the crying man behind the metal door and the intelligent monkey at my breakfast table be the same person? It sounded like a story a mad person would tell. A man trapped in a monkey's body? A curse. The kind of tale the old women in my village would whisper about in the dark. But I was living in a world where a monkey owned shipping lines. Madness was my new reality. My new goal was clear. I was no longer just a prisoner trying to escape. I was an investigator. I had to understand the secret of this house. I decided to start with the servants. The young maid who brought my food and cleaned my room was named Sade. She was quiet and always looked at the floor when I was near. This day, I decided to make her look at me. When she came to clear my breakfast plate, I spoke to her. "Sade," I said, my voice gentle, "how long have you worked here?" She flinched, surprised that I had spoken to her. "2 years, madam," she whispered, her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall behind me. "You must know the master well," I said, watching her carefully. At the mention of Master Coco, a flicker of fear crossed her face. She quickly grabbed my plate and turned to leave. "I only do my work, madam." "Wait," I said, my voice a little firmer. I stood up and walked closer to her. "Sade, please, I just want to understand. In the night, I hear things, sounds." She widened her eyes. She shook her head quickly, her whole body tense. "I hear nothing, madam. The house is very quiet at night." She was lying. I could see it in the way she refused to meet my gaze, in the way her hands trembled. "Sade," I began, but she pulled away from me. "Please, madam," she begged in a tiny voice, "do not ask me questions. I will lose my job, or worse." Before I could say another word, she hurried out of the room, leaving me alone with my questions. She was terrified. They were all terrified. Mr. Adebayo ruled this house with a quiet authority that was more frightening than any shouting could be. The servants were his prisoners too, in a different kind of cage. I knew I would get no answers from them. I would have to find them myself. That afternoon, I decided to test Mr. Coco. While my room was being cleaned, I was allowed to walk in certain parts of the mansion. I went to the grand room where I had first seen him. He was there, sitting in a large armchair by the window, looking out at the garden. A huge book with colorful pictures of birds was open on his lap. I took the small wooden bird Kachi had carved for me from my pocket, my last connection to my old life. My heart ached as I looked at it. I placed it on a small table near his chair, then retreated to the other side of the room, pretending to look at a painting. I watched him from the corner of my eye. After a few minutes, he seemed to sense the object. He turned his head and saw the wooden bird. He put his book down and shuffled over to the table. He did not grab it or break it, as I half expected him to. He picked it up with a strange gentleness, his large, hairy fingers surprisingly delicate. He held it up to the light, turning it over and over, examining the crude knife marks that formed the wings and tail. He brought the bird to his nose and sniffed it. Then he did something that made my breath catch. He held the bird in his palm and closed his eyes for a moment, and his face held an expression of profound sadness. It was the same deep sorrow I had heard in the weeping man's cries. He opened his eyes, looked directly at me across the room, and then carefully placed the bird back on the table, exactly where I had left it. My test had given me an answer, but it was an answer that scared me more than anything else. There was a soul trapped inside that animal body, a soul that understood art and loss and sadness. My search for answers became more desperate. That evening, I discovered the library. It was a room I had not been shown, with walls lined from floor to ceiling with books. It smelled of old paper and leather. This had to be the heart of the house, the center of all its secrets. I spent an hour pulling books from the shelves, books on business and economics, history and science. Then I found a small section in the back corner. It was different. The books here were old, with faded leather covers. They were books about local history, folklore and legends, books about juju and curses. My hands trembled as I pulled one out. Tucked inside its pages, like a forgotten bookmark, was a photograph. It was old and faded at the edges. It was a picture of a handsome, smiling young man with kind eyes standing on the front steps of this very mansion. He was wearing a university graduation gown. He looked happy and full of life. I felt a strange sense of recognition, though I had never seen him before. I turned the photograph over. On the back, written in faint, spidery handwriting, was a name and a date. David Coco, 1995. Coco! It was him. This was my husband. Before. My heart hammered in my chest. I looked from the photograph of the smiling young man to the doorway of the library, half expecting to see the chimpanzee standing there. It was him. It had to be. Something terrible had happened to him. Then my fingers felt something else scribbled below the name, almost too faint to see. A single word. Help. Looking for something to read, madam? I gasped and spun around, shoving the photograph quickly back into the book. Mr. Adebayo was standing in the doorway, his arms folded. His face was calm, but his eyes were as sharp and cold as chips of glass. He had moved so silently, I hadn't heard him approach. I was just looking, I stammered, my mind racing. Did he see? Did he know what I had found? His eyes swept over the book in my hands, then moved to my face. He gave me a thin, cold smile that did not reach his eyes. He said, "Be careful, madam. Some stories are better left on the shelf."